I only needed 1 week to discover every weakness in the most important project my boss had ever handled. I only needed 2 hours to destroy it. All because they thought I was just another disposable little girl when they slashed my hours without warning. They never saw it coming, how someone they'd written off as insignificant could orchestrate their downfall from the shadows. By the time they realized what was happening, their precious $12 million deal was already crumbling. And there wasn't a single fingerprint leading back to me. My name is Rachel Monroe. And until 3 months ago, I believed loyalty meant something in the corporate world. At 32, I'd spent 5 years building my reputation as a financial analyst at Stratwell Group, a mid-sized commercial consulting firm nestled in the sleek glass towers of downtown Elmbrook, Colorado. I wasn't the type to make waves or demand attention. I let my work speak for itself. Spreadsheets were my language, risk assessments my poetry, and I could spot a financial discrepancy from a mile away. I'd always been the quiet one in meetings, the person who sat in the middle rows, took meticulous notes, and delivered reports that saved our clients millions. My appearance was unremarkable: medium height, brown hair usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, clothes from Target rather than Nordstrom. Maybe that's why they thought I'd be an easy target. Everything changed when Derek Langford strutted into our office as the new department manager. Fresh from an MBA program and armed with connections rather than experience, he had that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences. Tall, perfectly styled, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, Derek immediately set about optimizing our department. The first sign of trouble came on a mundane Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly projections when an email from HR popped up. Updated work schedule, effective immediately. My stomach dropped as I read the details. My hours had been cut from full-time to barely 25 hours a week. No explanation, no meeting, no warning. The impact was immediate and brutal. Nearly 40% of my income, gone. My carefully balanced budget, the mortgage on my modest condo, my student loans, everything suddenly teetered on the edge of disaster. When I confronted Derek in his corner office, all glass walls and designer furniture, he barely looked up from his monitor. "It's just cost optimization, Rachel," he said, his tone suggesting I was being dramatic about something trivial. "Nothing personal. The company needs to trim fat wherever possible." Fat. 5 years of dedicated service, countless overtime hours, and proven results, reduced to a single dismissive word. But my performance reviews have been exceptional. I managed, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I've brought in 3 major clients this quarter alone. Derek finally looked at me then, and I saw it, the calculated indifference, the slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Performance isn't everything. We need team players who can adapt to changing circumstances. Besides, he gestured vaguely at a stack of resumes on his desk. Plenty of eager young talent out there willing to prove themselves. That's when I noticed her, through the glass walls of the conference room. Brittany Chen, the intern who'd started just 2 weeks ago, 23, fresh out of college, with no experience beyond a summer internship at her father's company. She was laughing at something on her phone, her designer heels propped up on the conference table. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The way Derek's eyes lingered on her during meetings. Their convenient, working lunches. The sudden need for cost optimization that somehow only affected my position. "Is this about making room for Brittany?" I asked, my professionalism finally cracking. Derek's face hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Rachel. I'd be very careful about spreading unfounded rumors. It wouldn't look good on your next performance review." He paused, letting the threat sink in. What's left of it, anyway? I walked out of his office with my dignity intact, but my faith in the company shattered. They saw me as disposable, a line item to be erased to make room for Derek's side piece, the quiet, dependable analyst who would accept this injustice without a fight. They had no idea how wrong they were. For the first week after the hour cuts, I went through the motions of looking for new employment. My resume circulated through LinkedIn, Indeed, and every job board I could find. But Elmbrook's financial sector was small, interconnected, and word traveled fast. During a particularly demoralizing interview, the hiring manager let slip that Derek had been providing references for former employees. The meaning was clear. He was poisoning the well. That night, I sat in my home office, staring at my laptop screen. The sensible part of me said to keep trying, to move to another city if necessary, to start fresh. But then I opened my work email and saw Derek's name attached to a company-wide announcement: Stratwell Group poised for historic $12 million merger. Langford team leading the charge. My fingers trembled as I read the details. This was Derek's golden ticket, his chance to prove himself to the board of directors. Successfully closing this deal would cement his position, probably earn him a hefty bonus, and give him even more power to reshape the department in his image. The fury that had been simmering for days finally boiled over. Why should I slink away in defeat while he celebrated? Why should he get to destroy my career and walk away unscathed? Why should I leave as the loser, I whispered to the empty room, when I could make him lose everything? The idea took root like a weed, growing stronger with each passing hour. I knew Derek's weaknesses, his arrogance, his sloppiness when he thought no one was watching, his habit of taking credit for other people's work. But knowing weaknesses and exploiting them were two different things. I needed information. Real, actionable intelligence about this merger. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in the office. With my reduced hours, people barely noticed when I was there, which made it easier to observe, to listen. To access shared drives and accidentally be copied on emails meant for the full-time team. The merger involved acquiring Technova Solutions, a smaller firm with valuable patents. The deal hinged on Stratwell's financial projections, showing we could integrate their technology profitably. Derek was personally overseeing the financial modeling, which meant Brittany, whose qualifications included a business degree she'd barely earned and an Instagram following, was doing most of the actual work. Late one evening, when the office was nearly empty, I stayed behind to catch up on work. In reality, I was combing through the shared project folders. What I found made my blood run cold, then hot with possibility. The financial projections were a masterpiece of creative accounting, revenue estimates inflated by 30%, integration costs understated by half, risk factors buried in footnotes or omitted entirely. It wasn't just incompetence, it was deliberate manipulation designed to make the merger look far more attractive than reality warranted. I took screenshots, saved copies, documented everything with the methodical precision that had made me valuable in the first place. But I knew I couldn't just march into HR or the board with accusations. Derek had already painted me as a disgruntled employee. I needed to be smarter. That's when I remembered Gina Ramos. Gina and I had met at a conference 3 years ago. She'd been the in-house counsel for Microtech, a company Stratwell had acquired in a hostile takeover. She'd warned them about irregularities in Stratwell's proposals, but her concerns were dismissed. 6 months later, Microtech's value had been stripped, its employees laid off, and Gina herself blacklisted for being difficult. I found her number in my contacts and typed out a message. Remember what Stratwell did to Microtech? I have a chance to return the favor. Interested? Her response came within minutes. I've been waiting 3 years for this call. Coffee tomorrow. We met at a small cafe downtown, far from Stratwell's offices. Gina looked exactly as I remembered, sharp eyes behind designer glasses, an air of coiled intelligence. She listened as I laid out what I'd discovered, occasionally asking pointed questions. You can't just expose this directly, she said finally. They'll bury you in legal threats and NDAs, but there are ways to make the information available to interested parties without implicating yourself. She explained whistleblower protections, anonymous reporting channels, and most importantly, how to create what she called organic discovery. Situations where Derek's fraud would be uncovered naturally through his own actions. The key, Gina said, leaning forward conspiratorially, is to let him hang himself. You just have to provide the rope. As I walked back to my car that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not just for a new job or a fresh start, but for something far more satisfying. Justice. Served cold. With a side of devastating consequences. Gina and I met twice more over the next week, each time in a different location. She was paranoid about surveillance, and her caution was infectious. During our sessions, she taught me the art of corporate warfare, how to wage battle without leaving fingerprints. First rule, she said, sliding a legal pad across the table at our second meeting. Document everything, but never on company equipment. Second rule, every action must appear organic, like a natural consequence of their own mistakes. Third rule, always have plausible deniability. Together, we crafted a 3-phase plan that would unravel Derek's $12 million triumph. Phase 1, the honey trap document. I would create a subtly flawed financial analysis, one that looked correct on the surface but contained critical errors that only an experienced analyst would catch. The errors would be the kind that emerged from rushing, from overconfidence, from letting an unqualified person handle complex calculations. I'd leave this document where Derek's team would discover it and, knowing their habits, incorporate it into their final presentation without proper vetting. Make the errors believable, Gina advised. Transposed numbers in cell formulas, incorrect compound interest calculations, misaligned fiscal quarters, things that look like carelessness, not sabotage. Phase 2, seeds of doubt. While Derek's team was busy incorporating the flawed data, I would anonymously alert Technova's due diligence team to potential discrepancies in Stratwell's numbers. Not accusations, just concerned observations from a shareholder suggesting they might want to verify certain projections independently. Gina helped me set up an untraceable email account using a VPN and public Wi-Fi. Never from your home network, she warned. Never from your personal devices. Always from busy public places with security cameras that don't keep long-term footage. Phase 3. The nuclear option. This was Gina's masterstroke. We would compile a comprehensive dossier documenting Derek's fraud, original documents, altered versions, timestamps, email trails, everything. But instead of sending it immediately, we'd use a delayed send service. Think of it as a dead man's switch, Gina explained. Set it to send to the board of directors, the SEC, and Technova's leadership team exactly 1 hour after the merger signing is scheduled. That way, if phases 1 and 2 work, you can cancel it. If they don't, she didn't need to finish. If the first 2 phases failed, the nuclear option would ensure Derek's fraud was exposed at the worst possible moment. After he'd publicly taken credit, but before the deal could be finalized. The beauty of the plan was its elegance. Each phase built on the previous one, creating multiple failure points for Derek while protecting me from direct involvement. I spent the weekend crafting the honey trap document. It had to be perfect in its imperfection, sophisticated enough that Derek would want to steal it, flawed enough to destroy him. I embedded the miscalculations deep in the formulae, where they'd compound over projected years. The 5-year revenue projection would be off by $3.2 million. The integration costs would balloon by 40% when properly calculated. The ROI would flip from positive to negative. Sunday night. I printed the document at a 24-hour copy shop 30 miles from home. Paying cash. Monday morning. I arrived early and placed it strategically in the shared printer tray, as if someone had forgotten to collect their print job. Then I settled at my desk with my coffee, watching through peripheral vision. At 8:47 a.m., Brittany strutted in, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She went straight to the printer, collecting what looked like social media printouts. The honey trap document caught her eye. I watched her scan it, her eyes widening at the impressive-looking charts and projections. By 9:15 a.m., she was in Derek's office, animated and gesturing at the papers. Through the glass walls, I could see Derek's expression shift from dismissive to interested to greedy. He held the document like it was gold. Phase 1, complete. That afternoon, I took a personal day and drove to a coffee shop in the University District. Using my burner laptop and their Wi-Fi, I composed a carefully worded email to Technova's CFO. As a concerned party with knowledge of the pending acquisition, I feel obligated to suggest your team independently verify all financial projections, particularly regarding years 3 to 5 of the integration plan. Public information suggests possible discrepancies between internal assessments and presented figures. Due diligence is always wise in transactions of this magnitude. I signed it, a friend of transparency, and hit send. Phase 2. Launched. The final phase required the most preparation. Over the next 3 days, I methodically compiled evidence of Derek's deceptions. Screenshots with timestamps. Email forwards showing him instructing Brittany to make the numbers work. Original documents versus their optimized versions. Everything went into an encrypted folder, which I uploaded to a secure cloud service Gina had recommended. Thursday evening. I sat in my apartment, setting up the delayed email through an anonymous service. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard as I entered the recipients. Every board member, the SEC's tips email, Technova's entire leadership team, and, for good measure, a financial journalist who specialized in corporate fraud. The email was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m., exactly 1 hour after the signing ceremony was set to begin. Your bomb is armed, I whispered to myself, clicking the final confirmation. All that remained was to wait and watch the fireworks. Or, if I was very lucky, to watch Derek light his own fuse first. Friday morning arrived with the electric tension of a coming storm. I dressed carefully, professional but forgettable, the same way I'd presented myself for 5 years at Stratwell. Today, invisibility was my greatest asset. The office buzzed with excitement about the merger signing. Derek had ordered catering, champagne was chilling in the break room, and the conference room had been decorated with both companies' logos. He strutted through the halls in his most expensive suit, practicing his remarks for the ceremony. I settled into my truncated morning routine, ostensibly updating client reports while keeping my peripheral attention on the growing circus. At 9:30 a.m., the first crack appeared. Derek? Brittany's voice carried a note of panic as she rushed into his office. Technova's CFO is asking for the raw data behind our projections. They want to verify everything independently. Through the glass walls, I watched Derek's face cycle through confusion, annoyance, and then, beautifully, the first hint of fear. That's not how this works, he snapped. The due diligence period is over. Tell them we'll address any concerns after the signing. But Technova wasn't backing down. Over the next hour, a flurry of emails flew back and forth. I could track the escalation by Derek's body language, loosened tie, rolled sleeves, increasingly frantic phone calls. At 10:45 a.m., I made my move. I knocked on Derek's door with a sympathetic expression. I couldn't help but notice the delays, I said softly. If you need someone to double-check the numbers, I'm happy to help. I know my hours were cut, but this merger is important for everyone. Derek barely glanced at me. Fine. Whatever. Brittany will give you the files. Just make sure everything adds up. 1. It was almost too easy. Brittany, overwhelmed and clearly out of her depth, practically threw the documents at me. Thank God someone who actually understands this stuff, she muttered. I spent the next hour in a visible display of diligent analysis, frowning at my screen, cross-referencing papers, occasionally gasping softly as if discovering something concerning. Other employees began to notice, clustering nearby, whispering. Derek, I called out, my voice carrying just the right note of professional concern. Could you come look at this? I think there might be a formula error in the 5-year projection. He stormed over, leaning over my shoulder. I pointed to the screen where the honey trap calculations were displayed in all their flawed glory. This can't be right, he muttered. Brittany said she triple-checked everything. I'm sure she did her best, I replied diplomatically. But look here, the compound interest is calculating monthly instead of annually. And this cell reference is pulling from the wrong quarter. The actual projection is... I let him see the real numbers. Watch the color drain from his face as he realized the $12 million success story was actually a $3 million loss waiting to happen. "Fix it," he hissed. "Now." "I can try," I said, loud enough for others to hear. "But Derek, if these are the numbers you've been showing Technova, we have a serious problem. The signing is in 2 hours." The whispers around us grew louder. Someone mentioned fraud. Another whispered SEC investigation. The panic was spreading like wildfire. Derek retreated to his office, slamming the door. Through the glass, I could see him on the phone, gesticulating wildly. Brittany sat in the corner, tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of her incompetence became clear. At 11:30 a.m., an email went out to all staff. "The merger signing has been postponed pending additional review." The champagne was quietly removed from the break room. But the real magic happened at 11:47 a.m., when someone, I'll never know who, forwarded the entire email chain to the board of directors. The chain that showed Derek instructing Brittany to massage the numbers. The chain where he dismissed concerns about accuracy with, "just make it look good." The chain that revealed he'd been sharing confidential information with Brittany before she was even officially hired. By noon, 3 members of the board were in the building. By 12:30, Stratwell's legal team had commandeered the large conference room. By 12:45, Derek was escorted to HR. I watched it all unfold from my desk, occasionally offering helpful comments like, "I tried to warn him about those calculations," and "I offered to help review the numbers weeks ago, but he said Brittany had it handled." Each comment was another nail in Derek's professional coffin, delivered with the concerned tone of a dedicated employee just trying to help. At 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before my nuclear option was set to deploy, I slipped out to the cafe across the street, using my burner laptop. I logged into the delayed email service and canceled the scheduled send. The bomb was no longer needed. Derek had already detonated his own career. I returned to the office to find chaos in full swing. Technova had officially withdrawn from negotiations. The board had launched a full investigation into Derek's department. Brittany's keycard had already been deactivated. As I packed up my desk that afternoon, playing the role of the shocked and saddened employee, I allowed myself one moment of pure satisfaction. Derek's corner office stood empty, his nameplate already removed. His carefully curated success story reduced to a cautionary tale about hubris and fraud. The best part? Everyone thought he'd done it to himself. Which, in a way, he had. The next 72 hours unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction. I had a front row seat to Derek's complete professional annihilation, and I savored every note. Monday morning brought the first wave of consequences. An all-staff email from the CEO himself announced a comprehensive audit of all financial projections and deal preparations over the past 6 months. The phrase "zero tolerance for misconduct" appeared 3 times in 4 paragraphs. I arrived early, as always, to find Derek's office being systematically stripped. 2 representatives from legal were boxing up files while an IT specialist wiped his computer. Through the industry grapevine, amazing how quickly word travels when a $12 million deal implodes, I learned that Technova wasn't just walking away. They were considering legal action for fraudulent misrepresentation. "Did you hear?" Margaret from accounting whispered as she passed my desk. They found emails where Derek told that intern to hide the real integration costs. He actually used the phrase "creative accounting" in writing. In writing! Can you believe it? I shook my head sympathetically. Shocking. He always seemed so careful about documentation. By Tuesday, the investigation had expanded. Forensic accountants, actual forensic accountants, had set up camp in Conference Room B. They called in everyone who'd worked on the merger proposal. When my turn came, I was the picture of helpful cooperation. I did notice some inconsistencies, I told them, producing my own carefully maintained records. I tried to bring them to Derek's attention, but he insisted Brittany had everything under control. Here are my original calculations from when I was still involved in the project, before my hours were cut. I slid across my folder, every document meticulously dated and stamped, showing the real numbers that Derek had later manipulated. The lead investigator's eyebrows rose as he compared my projections to Derek's Fantasyland versions. "Why were your hours cut, Ms. Monroe?" he asked, pen poised over his notepad. I maintained perfect professionalism. Derek said it was cost optimization, though I did find it odd that he hired a full-time intern immediately after reducing my role. The investigators exchanged meaningful glances. Wednesday brought the grand finale. The board called an emergency all-hands meeting at 2 p.m. The CEO stood at the podium, his face grave, and delivered news that rippled through the room like shockwaves. Derek Langford had been terminated for cause, no severance, no references. His actions had exposed the company to potential lawsuits and SEC investigations. The $12 million merger was dead, and Technova was demanding compensation for their wasted due diligence costs. But that wasn't even the best part. Furthermore, the CEO continued, his voice tight with controlled fury. Our investigation revealed a pattern of inappropriate hiring practices and potential embezzlement of company resources for personal relationships. The intern position created last month has been eliminated, and we're reviewing all recent personnel decisions. Brittany, it turned out, hadn't just been incompetent. She'd been billing hours she hadn't worked, expensing lavish lunches as client meetings, and using company resources for her social media influencer ambitions. Derek had approved it all. Of course, love makes fools of even the most calculating operators. The CEO finished with a promise of cultural reform, ethical renewal, and a return to merit-based advancement. The applause was thunderous. Around me, colleagues who'd suffered under Derek's favoritism and corner-cutting looked ready to weep with relief. That afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox from HR. Regarding your recent schedule adjustment, it read, "We've reviewed your performance history and believe an error was made, effective immediately. You're restored to full-time status with back pay for the reduced period. Furthermore, we'd like to discuss expanded responsibilities in the restructured department." I read it twice, allowing myself a small smile. Justice served with a side of vindication. Thursday's company newsletter included a small item buried on page 3. Derek Langford's professional licenses are under review by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority following allegations of fraudulent conduct. His LinkedIn profile disappeared the same day. By Friday, life at Stratwell had settled into a new rhythm. The merger team was disbanded, the forensic accountants had packed up, and people were beginning to speak in hopeful terms about fresh starts and clean slates. I worked late that evening, genuinely this time, helping to rebuild the damage Derek had caused. As I prepared to leave, I noticed a light still on in what used to be Derek's office. The new interim manager, promoted from within, someone who'd actually earned it, was working diligently on legitimate projections. Walking to my car, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Gina. The patient survived the surgery. Her response came quickly, and the cancer was removed. Congratulations, doctor. The $3 million loss from the failed merger would hurt Stratwell's quarterly numbers. The legal fees from Technova's threats would sting, but the company would recover, stronger and more ethical than before. Derek Langford, on the other hand, would not recover. In the financial consulting world of Elmbrook, Colorado, his name had become synonymous with fraud, incompetence, and catastrophic failure. The man who'd thought I was disposable had discovered that in corporate warfare, hubris is the most disposable quality of all. 72 hours. That's all it took to dismantle a career built on lies and nepotism. And I'd done it all without leaving a single fingerprint. 3 months passed in a blur of genuine productivity. With Derek gone and competent leadership in place, Stratwell began to heal. I threw myself into my work, helping to rebuild client trust and repair the damage from the failed merger. My colleagues, once wary of my reduced status, now sought my input on major decisions. The interim manager, Sandra Williams, even jokes that I'd saved the company millions by exposing the flawed projections. But I knew my time at Stratwell was ending, not because I had to leave, but because I chose to. The investigation's aftershocks had revealed more about Stratwell's culture than just Derek's corruption. The fact that he'd operated so brazenly, that Brittany's incompetence had gone unnoticed, that my concerns had been so easily dismissed, these were symptoms of a deeper disease. The board promised reform, but corporate promises are written in sand. I started interviewing quietly, selectively. This time, I asked the hard questions about company culture, advancement opportunities, and ethical standards. I wasn't just looking for a job, I was looking for a place that valued competence over connections. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Meridian Insights, a boutique consulting firm specializing in tech startups, wanted to offer me a senior analyst position. The salary was 30% higher than my Stratwell pay. The CEO was a woman who'd built the company from scratch. During my interview, she'd asked about the Stratwell merger debacle. News travels fast in our industry. "I heard you were the one who caught the errors," she said, studying me with sharp eyes. That took courage. I gave her my practiced response about just doing my job, but she waved it away. No, it took courage to speak up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That's exactly the kind of person we need at Meridian. My resignation letter to Stratwell was brief and professional. I gave them 4 weeks' notice, enough time to properly transition my responsibilities. Sandra tried to counter-offer, even hinting at a promotion. But my mind was made up. "You're one of our best analysts," she said. "Are you sure we can't change your mind?" "I appreciate everything Stratwell has taught me," I replied carefully. "But it's time for a new chapter." What I didn't say, Stratwell had taught me that loyalty without reciprocity is just exploitation. That quiet competence gets overlooked while loud mediocrity gets promoted. That sometimes the only way to win is to flip the board. My last day arrived on a crisp Friday in October. There was cake in the break room, sincere well wishes from colleagues, and a card signed by everyone in the department. As I packed up my desk for the final time, I found myself standing where Derek's office used to be. Sandra had redecorated completely. Gone were the glass walls and designer furniture, replaced with an open, collaborative space. "Crazy how much has changed," Margaret from accounting said, joining me. "Did you ever imagine Derek would self-destruct so spectacularly?" "People usually get what they deserve," I said mildly. "Eventually." That evening, Gina and I met for celebratory drinks at the same cafe where we'd planned Derek's downfall. She raised her glass with a knowing smile. "To justice served cold," she toasted. "To knowing when to walk away," I countered. We clinked glasses, and I felt the last weight of Stratwell lift from my shoulders. I'd entered that building as a loyal employee, had my trust betrayed, and responded with calculated precision. I was leaving not as a victim, but as an architect of my own vindication. The numbers told the story. Derek's career destroyed, the merger killed, Brittany's aspirations crushed, and Stratwell's practices exposed. Total damage to those who'd wronged me, immeasurable. Total legal consequences for me, 0. Total fingerprints left behind, none. But the real victory wasn't in the destruction. It was in the reconstruction of my career, my confidence, and my understanding of how the corporate world really works. Monday morning, I would walk into Meridian Insights with hard-won wisdom. I knew how to spot the Derek Langfords of the world now. More importantly, I knew how to stop them. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Derek had viewed my profile. I smiled, imagining him in his unemployment, seeing my new position, understanding finally that the disposable little girl had not only survived, but thrived. I blocked him without a second thought. Some bridges are meant to burn. Some lessons are written in ashes. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure the people who wronged you live with the consequences of their choices forever. As I drove away from Stratwell for the last time, I didn't look back. The rearview mirror held nothing but smoke and shadows. Ahead lay a road I'd paved with my own hands, one calculated move at a time. 6 months into my role at Meridian Insights, I stood before a room full of startup founders, presenting a financial strategy that would help them scale sustainably. My voice was clear, confident, carrying the authority of someone who'd learned to value their own expertise. The presentation went flawlessly because I'd built it on solid foundations, not the smoke and mirrors Derek had preferred. Afterward, the CEO pulled me aside. "Rachel, that was exceptional. The client specifically requested you for their next project. You've become quite the asset to our team." Asset, not overhead, not expendable, not a line item to be cut. "Thank you," I said simply. "I love what I do here." And I meant it. Meridian was everything Stratwell hadn't been: ethical, meritocratic, and forward-thinking. My ideas were heard, my contributions recognized, and my paycheck reflected my actual value. The 30% raise had been just the beginning. Performance bonuses and project commissions had pushed my income well beyond what I'd ever earned at Stratwell. But the universe has a sense of humor about closure. One rainy Thursday evening, I stopped at a grocery store in a part of town I rarely visited. As I reached for a bottle of wine, a good one, because I could afford it now, I heard a familiar voice. "Rachel?" I turned to find Derek Langford standing there with a basket full of generic brands and discount items. He looked diminished. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by khakis and a polo shirt with a chain restaurant logo. His hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp. The arrogance that had defined him had evaporated, leaving behind something hollow. "Derek," I acknowledged neutrally. "I heard you're at Meridian now," he said, attempting his old confident smile but achieving only a grimace. "Good for you. That's great." I could have walked away, should have, probably. But curiosity won. "And you?" I asked, though his uniform told the story. "Restaurant management," he said quickly. "It's temporary. Just until the FINRA investigation clears. My lawyer says it should be dropped soon." We both knew he was lying. FINRA doesn't just drop investigations into fraudulent financial reporting. His licenses were gone forever. And with them, any hope of returning to financial consulting. "Well," I said, placing the wine in my basket. "Good luck with everything." I started to leave, but his hand shot out, not touching me, but gesturing for me to wait. "Rachel, He swallowed hard. "I know what you did." I raised an eyebrow, perfectly calm. "What I did?" "The document. The emails to Technova. All of it." His voice was bitter but oddly respectful. "I can't prove it, obviously. You were too smart for that. But I know." I looked him directly in the eye. "Derek, you destroyed yourself. You submitted fraudulent projections. You hired an unqualified intern for personal reasons. You cut my hours to make room for her. You built a house of cards and then lit a match. Whatever happened to you, you did to yourself." He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed, a broken sound. "You know what the worst part is? You're absolutely right. I did do it to myself. I never thought someone like you would be the one to hand me the rope." Someone like me, even now, he couldn't help but diminish others. "I prefer to think of it as allowing natural consequences to occur," I said mildly. "Take care, Derek." I walked away, leaving him standing in the discount wine aisle of his new reality. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt complete. The story that had begun with my hours being cut had reached its natural conclusion. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, processing the encounter. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Gina. "Saw our friend today. Natural consequences fully manifested." Her response was immediate. "And how did that feel?" I thought about it. Like closing a book I never need to open again. That night, in my upgraded apartment with its view of the mountains, I raised a glass of the good wine to no one in particular. I'd learned so much in the past year. That loyalty must be earned and reciprocated. That competence without confidence is invisible. That sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemies defeat themselves. Most importantly, I'd learned that I wasn't just a cog in someone else's machine. I was the engineer of my own destiny. Derek thought he'd cut my hours, reduced my worth, made me small. Instead, he'd taught me how to topple giants. I once thought I was just a pawn, I said to my reflection in the window, the city lights sparkling below. Turns out, I was the one controlling the board all along. The girl who'd sat quietly in meetings, who'd let her work speak for itself, who'd believed loyalty would be rewarded. She was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that in the corporate world, you're either predator or prey. And I'd evolved into something far more dangerous than Derek could have imagined. Someone who could smile while serving revenge at exactly the right temperature. Thank you so much for listening to my story of corporate revenge and justice served cold. I'm curious, where are you listening to this tale of office payback? Are you on your commute, taking a break at work, or perhaps plotting your own workplace justice? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of revenge, redemption, and real-world karma. And please, share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced workplace injustice? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else who's facing their own Derek Langford. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves while you rise above.